Welcome everyone that is joining us now to today's AHA Live tutorial. Great to see you all joining us live today, where we will be covering what it takes to pull off a successful product launch. And as you are joining us here and getting settled in, we are super curious to know how frequently you all use Gantt charts. All experience levels are welcome, of course. So I'm going to launch a poll here so you can tell us how often you use Gantt charts. All right, so let's take a look at these poll results. And it looks like mostly occasionally, some all the time. I relate to that. I use Gantt charts all the time, and then some never. All right, thank you everyone for that. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's presenters. So go ahead and join me on camera, Chrissi and Kathryn. Thanks. So I have with me Chrissi McNamara, who is a product manager at AHA with years of experience launching products here, including our recent update of nested features and epics on Gantt charts, which we'll be taking a look at here with you shortly. And she also used to help customers directly on our product success team before that, so maybe a familiar face for some of you here. And then we also have my colleague, Kathryn Tirador from our product marketing team here at AHA, and also a former AHA user at one of our enterprise customers. So she has been in your shoes. And Kathryn will be walking you through how to set yourself up for a successful launch in AHA Roadmaps. So without further ado, I'll let you go ahead and take it away, Chrissi.
Yes, thank you, Rose. We can see in the poll here, the majority of you have used Gantt occasionally, and some of you use it all the time. And of course, we love to see that. Some of you I see have never used Gantt charts before, and like Rose mentioned, that's totally fine. Either way, whether you use Gantt charts daily or have never built one before, we're sure you'll come away from today's session with some great information. I'm thrilled to be here today because one of the most exciting parts about being a product manager is launching products. It's a really great feeling to build something of value and then deliver it to your customers. As I'm sure many of you can relate to, there's a lot that can go wrong during a launch. I've worked at companies in the past where we did not have a set process or a purpose-built tool for managing our launches. Instead, we would use a combination of spreadsheets to track activities and important dates. And as you can probably guess, this made it really hard to keep everyone up to date on what's happening, and deadlines would sometimes get missed as a result. So I'm curious to know, what is the biggest challenge you have faced during a product launch? You'll see a poll coming on Zoom now, or you can share your feedback. So was it not enough planning early on? Maybe there was a lack of alignment with cross-functional teams, or was it plans getting derailed because of missed dependencies? I'll give it a few seconds here. Thank you for your responses so far. I can see that there's a lot of you who struggle with cross-functional alignment, but there's also kind of an even split across the rest. Well, today we're going to be touching on all of these topics while covering our 3 keys to success: alignment, planning, and management. And if you stick around until the end, you'll also hear about our 4th bonus step. So let's dive in. Let's get into the first key to success, which is alignment. So let's assume that your team has already had a discussion on what's going to be included in your launch, meaning all the features have already been identified and prioritized. So now you're focused on execution. At this stage, early collaboration meetings are super important. It gives you the chance to share the scope of your launch and get an understanding of what other cross-functional activities need to be completed. You can then incorporate this feedback from your plan into your plan from the beginning. So we refer to these cross-functional activities as phases and milestones. And outlining these phases and milestones helps set clear expectations of other teams and gives them a way to see how they're an important player in the overall plan. We have a way for you to keep track of these in AHA, which Kathryn will go over a little later. Getting this early input also gives you the opportunity to start setting dependencies between your work items. And as we saw in the previous poll, a lot of times you can run into challenges when dependencies are missed. So it's really crucial to keep track of these. We know dependencies can, of course, crop up at any time, but it's important that you document any known dependencies upfront as much as possible. Now let's see how you can accomplish this step in AHA. Over to you, Kathryn.
Thank you, Chrissy. So today we are going to imagine that we are product managers for this fictitious cycling application, Fredwin Cycling. And as we all know, a ton goes into planning out a product launch. So we're going to imagine that we have already gone through the really important steps of setting our strategy, reviewing all the great ideas that have come through in our ideas portal, either from our customers or our sales and support teams, and then prioritize those ideas and features based off of value and done some initial capacity planning to make sure our longer term roadmap is feasible. So where we're going to start today is on our features board, and we're at the point where we have our prioritized list of features, and now we're ready to build out our release or our launch and kind of start to organize those features and get that cross-functional input. So I'm here on our features board, and from here, I'm going to add a new release for our premium plan updates is going to be our big launch. Our release date is going to be the middle of April. And then I'm going to keep everything else the same here and create this release. So now you'll see it pop up third here on the list. So these are going to show up in sequential order based off of release date. And we'll touch into this mobile app updates release and our partner portal release kind of further on in the tutorial so that we can start to see what it will look like as we get progress. But for now, let's focus on our brand new premium plan release. So let's add a capacity for 45 days, just based off of what I know we have available from the team. And now I want to start to add in features. So I'm going to open up our parking lot. Just for conveniency, I tagged these features as premium to give me a quick, easy visual as to what I want to add into that release. But you could also add a parking lot release and then promote that to your features board as well. That's an easy way to do it. But here I'm going to hold down Command and multi-select these features I have tagged as premium and then drag them over into this release. So when you multi-select, you can also right-click here. It's a little hidden trick. You can bulk edit features on your features board this way, even move them to a release from this menu as well. So I have these features added. I'll get rid of my parking lot for now. And at this point, I want to start to gather that input from those cross-functional teams. So starting with engineering, we're going to want to get a better understanding of how long these features are going to take to develop and whether there's any of those dependencies we should be mindful of early on. So I'm going to start with this top feature, and I'm actually going to go into the details view. I really like this view because if I expand here on the left, I get a list of all the features within this release, and then I can drill into the details of each feature here on the right. So let's imagine we're in a meeting with engineering, or we've received input that initially we thought this would take 9 days. It's going to take slightly longer, just 10 days. I'm just going to enter in that detailed estimate there. So I entered this in manually, but you can also always map this field with your integrations with, let's say you're using Jira or Azure DevOps. You can map this field with that tool, and then engineering can always enter in those estimates there. And then you're automatically going to get the update here in AHA. So you don't necessarily have to make any manual updates if that's the workflow that works best for your team. So also within this feature, we understand from the team that there is a dependency of our community leaderboards feature. So let's create that link as well. And then we'll be able to visualize this on the Gantt in our next step. I'm going to head over to advanced performance analytics. Here, I already have some requirements listed out, which is great. So when I come into my detailed estimate field, I'm actually going to use requirements estimates, and then that's going to automatically calculate the detailed estimate off of the estimates we have in that requirement. So let's imagine that we really go through this process for all of our features, gathering that input from engineering, and then we have a good plan to go forward. Now, of course, there's other cross-functional teams you want to get input on. One in particular, like marketing. One helpful way to gather this is if you can set them up with their own workspace in your AHA account. We have marketing-specific workspaces that have their own specific terminology. So it's an easy way to kind of bring all of the work together. And then in future steps, you can start to bring in those multiple workspaces into one view if that's helpful for you, or to capture those additional input as phases and milestones, which we will cover in our next step. So we really briefly touched on the capacity planning here. We have a dedicated tutorial on capacity planning, which we can pop into the chat here if you would like more information on that. So a quick recap, we created this new release, added our features in here, started to gather input from cross-functional teams to kind of continue filling out the data here and set up those initial dependencies. Back over to you, Chrissy.
So now let's talk about how you can start to build out your plan. There are a lot of different ways that you can visualize your plan, and it's really important to know when you need to build a Gantt chart or another type of roadmap. I'm definitely not suggesting one is better or more important than the other. In fact, they're quite complementary to each other. It's just that the view you'll want to use will depend on your audience and also the level of detail that you want to communicate. So Gantt charts are best used to tell you the what and the when of your plans, and they're also a great tool for visualizing work across cross-functional teams. And because they are such a great tool for launches, we are focusing on Gantt chart for today's tutorial. But of course, there are many other different types of roadmaps you can build within AHA. We actually hosted a different tutorial towards the end of last year about how to build your 2024 roadmap, where we went through some of these examples, and I would encourage you to check that out. One of my favorite things about a Gantt chart is how easy it is to establish and visualize dependencies. Since everything is in a single view, you can quickly identify conflicts and see that your timelines are reasonable and that you have scheduled work in the right sequence. Lastly, it's really important to make this chart easy to find. You definitely do not want your teammates waiting for a check-in meeting to review what's been assigned to them or having to go into a million different places to look for a copy. So Kathryn will cover a few different ways you can make your Gantt chart easily available to your stakeholders.
Thank you, Chrissy. So before we head into our Gantt charts, I wanted to talk a little bit about release templates. So if you're an admin for your workspace, you can come into your settings, into your workspace settings, and head over to release templates. You may have noticed when we created that release, we started with this default product template we inherited from our product line. But let's imagine that this is a bigger launch, and so we want to use our product launch template. So let me open this up so that we can start to look at what the phases and milestones we have set up here. So these templates are a great way to kind of set up those standard phases and milestones that each team needs to go through for a release or launch, and do it in a standardized way that can be repeatable as you create new releases without having to start from scratch each time. So I'm going to open up one phase here, prioritize customer ideas as an example. So you can set up a description for these. You can determine the type. So you can think of a milestone as essentially a single day. So your launch day or a sales training, for example. A phase will span multiple days and will be depicted as a bar on your Gantt chart. You can set up initial dependencies here, the default duration or how long that will span on your Gantt, the color, which you'll also see pop up on our Gantt. And you can even create to-dos. So you can imagine for prioritizing customer ideas, maybe you want to create a to-do each time for the product manager to review incoming ideas in the ideas portal. So just really streamlining your processes there. Development is going to be our biggest phase in this example. And I want to actually set a dependency on having the features be defined before the development phase starts. So I'm just going to check that dependency, save it. And now this is in a really great place. This is what I want to apply to that new release we just started. So I am going to come back over to my features board and open up the release details, and I'm going to apply this new release phase template. I'm just going to replace it all together with my product launch template and apply those changes. Alrighty, so now let's see what is going to look like on our Gantt chart. So I'm going to come into releases, Gantt. Let me reset back to our default view here. All right, so we see a lot of information here. So I want to take a step back, just kind of break down everything that we're seeing. So first off, there are 3 different types of Gantt charts that you can take a look at. Starting at the bottom, we have our epics and features Gantt. So as the name suggests, it's just going to have your features nested within their epics, and then we'll visualize release names with their dates up here at the top. And our newest Gantt chart is the releases epics and features Gantt that we released last month. So this is going to give you another layer of information with your features nested within those epics, nested within their releases. But we just spent quite a bit of time setting up those phases and milestones. So I'm going to spend the majority of today on our releases, phases, and features Gantt. So automatically it is pulling in all of our active releases, but I really want to narrow in my view into that premium plan release that we created. So I'm going to leverage the filters here at the top to select premium plan, kind of narrow that in. I'll expand the release so we can see. So here is where you can start to bring in additional workspaces. Let's say if you're working at a higher portfolio level, you want to take a look at other products within your product line, really easy to do from the filters. And then you can also configure your timeline here on the right. So I really like to click fit because it's just going to easily fit the timeline with all the data that is present on the chart. But you can obviously customize this or configure it in a way that works best for you. Speaking of configuration, you can also choose to customize your view. So you can hide weekends are shown kind of in this darker gray here on the chart. We have assignees currently showing up next to each feature, the blue bars. I'm going to hide those for now just to streamline our view. And since this is a brand new release, now work is in progress, I'm going to hide our progress charts as well just to make it a little bit easier to review. And then you can choose how you would like to even color your bars. So by type right now, it's showing phases and milestones in blue, and those features in blue, phases and milestones in green, but I'm gonna choose status. So we get those nice colors we set up in that release template. You can choose how you'd like to sort the objects on your chart, and you can also choose to hide dependency lines. This kind of comes into play if you have a ton of dependencies showing up on the Gantt chart, and it's really cluttering your view and making it not a useful view, then you can always hide those connector lines. This does not get rid of any dependencies on the records themselves. It's just hiding them from the chart. But we definitely want to take a look at dependencies. So we are going to keep that open. All right, so we can start to see those phases and milestones that we had in our release template. I'm going to open up development and add the features in my release under this phase just to organize my data a bit more. And then if we look at overview, you can start to see also the type of data that you can gather for a phase or milestone. So they can have their own progress, their date ranges. And a new feature recently added is the ability to add a custom field to a phase or milestone. So this gives you a lot of flexibility in collecting additional data on these records. So you can think of assignee or another type of data that then you can use later on to pull into reporting as it works for you. So let me refresh so we can see our features nested within our development phase. And let's also, actually for this release, we really want to add a launch kickoff call. So right from the Gantt, I can add a new milestone for launch kickoff. We see it pop up here. I'm going to drag it over to be right before development starts, kind of after the release has been reviewed with the product team. Alrighty, so I am liking how this is looking, but right away we can start to see we have some conflicting dependencies.
So if you recall in the beginning, we set up a dependency between top athlete analytics and community leaderboards. And the way they are scheduled right now is in conflict. So of course we want to resolve that before we start the work. So I can really easily come here and reschedule these features just by dragging them across the Gantt chart. So this is really handy because I get a visual indicator that if I schedule it too earlier, I'm going to have a conflict on another feature. So I can kind of find that sweet spot right here in the middle. And as I drag these features across the Gantt chart, same applies to phases and milestones. It's automatically going to update the date on the record, so you don't have to go back in and do any manual updates there. Now you might notice this other dependencies section here at the bottom. So it's likely that you might have dependencies on other teams or on work in a different release. That's totally okay. And of course, on this Gantt chart, you want to have a complete view of all the dependencies on your work. So the features that are in a separate release are not visualized here in this Gantt, so maybe they're in a different workspace. Those are going to show up in your other dependency section here at the bottom. And then it's really nice, you can click into these features and start to understand who the owner is, for example. If you need to reach out to them to talk about scheduling, maybe they can start their work earlier, maybe you have to start your work later. This gives you a good starting point to start to have those conversations and resolve those dependencies. So in this case, I'm just going to shift this feature over to the right to resolve that dependency. And so we can be confident that we're going to be able to go forward, and hopefully we won't be at risk due to any conflicting dependencies. So now I really like how this Gantt chart is coming out. So I know it's going to be something that I am going to be referring to a lot throughout the release. So I am going to save this view as my premium plan Gantt. I'm going to share it with everyone in my account that you can narrow that down if that works for you. And then I'm going to allow folks to edit it if they need to. So now I have saved it. I'm also going to favorite it because I know it's something I'm going to come back to often. So that way, when I come into saved views, so this will be true if I'm coming into saved views from the Gantt or from a different roadmap, I'll be able to see my premium plan Gantt listed here as my favorites. It'll also show up, within all of the reports I have saved as well. Now, if you want to take it one step further and make it even easier for your teammates to find, you can set this up as a default view. So again, if you're an admin for your workspace, you can come into your workspace settings and click on default views, and then set up a default to be that premium plan Gantt. So what this means is that any user with access to your Fredwin Cycling workspace in this instance, when they come into releases into Gantt, this is going to be the Gantt chart that they see, kind of not that original view that we saw when we first came here that had all of our active releases in it. So this makes it just extra easy for folks to find. They can always edit the data as they need. It's not going to affect your default. So they can add in additional releases or different products. And if they deviate and want to come back, they can always come back and reset that default view. So I know we kind of covered a lot in this section. So we started off talking about those release templates with phases and milestones. Then we talked about our basics of our Gantt, started to resolve those dependencies, and saved the view. Back over to you, Chrissy.
So now let's fast forward a few weeks and imagine your launch is underway. One of the best things you can do is update the progress in real time and automate this process as much as possible. Here at how we usually track feature progress from the requirements completed and then track release progress based on the features. This way, we do not have to enter any progress values manually. We can just go about our day-to-day tasks and progress is automatically calculated. Once you have your progress tracking system established, you can start to check in on progress regularly. So depending on the size of your launch, you can do this every few days or once a week, for example. This way, you know whether your plan is on track or if there are any delivery risks you need to take action on. It's important to take action on these sooner rather than later so that you do not have to scramble at the last minute and you can keep everyone as calm as possible before the launch. The last point here is an interesting one. It's about establishing trust. It's really important to have trust and an open line of communication for the team. Without it, folks might be too worried to speak up about a problem until it's too late. This can ultimately put your launch at risk and, more importantly, bring down the morale of the team. When people feel comfortable speaking up, you can truly understand how things are going and make any changes as needed to the plan. Passing it back to Kathryn now so we can see how this all works out in AHA.
Yes, definitely. So now we're going to shift our focus to that kind of second release we saw on our features board, which is for mobile updates. So that's one we have in progress, so we can start to see how we can visualize progress in a Gantt. So let me start out by coming back into customize view, and I am now going to show the progress on the chart itself, and then our progress little donut charts here on the left. So you can see features that are 100% complete are completely filled in, and then those that have, less than 100%, you're going to see that visually indicated on each feature bar. So this is a really nice, quick visual indicator as to how things are going. And like Chrissi mentioned, there are multiple ways that you can measure progress. So if I open up this feature, we can see we have progress being calculated off of our remaining estimate. So you can see there's a few other options available. Essentially, you can either enter in progress manually, or you can set up some sort of automated calculation. So here we're using remaining estimate. Just like we were talking about with the detailed estimates, this is another field that you can map to your integrations. So if you have engineering measuring progress in their development tool, you can map that with AHA, so that way you're getting automatic progress updates without having to check in with someone, kind of make those manual updates here. So that option is always available to you as well. So if we go up a level, kind of thinking of features as one of our lower levels, you can also come into a release phase and calculate the progress of a phase based off of your features progress. And then if we go up a level higher for our release, you can choose to calculate progress based off of features, based off of epics. You can see there's multiple calculation options here available to you. And you can start to imagine how this progress can really roll up to higher levels of records, for example, all the way up to your initiatives and goals at your products level, or even all the way up to your company level. And if you're an administrator, you can also set up kind of defaults for how progress is calculated. So each individual PM doesn't need to come in here and kind of set these settings themselves, but just a lot of really great options available to configure how you wish. So right away, let's look at this blue line coming down here at the bottom. So this is today's date. So on the Gantt chart, it gives you kind of a nice visual as to whether things are maybe possibly falling behind. Obviously, probably won't be perfectly lined up with today's date, but gives you that quick first indication. For example, we see with this payment security update feature, hasn't been started. It was supposed to be completed quite a while ago. So we can quickly come into the feature details, start to investigate. We have some delivery risks flagged for this, that the work's overdue. Work has also been started late, obviously, since it hasn't started. So this gives us that early indication that maybe this is something at risk, start to have those conversations about whether it needs to be prioritized above something else. So another way to visualize progress is to actually take a look at the retrospective report. So I'm going to come into my mobile app updates release, and the burn down chart is another quick visual indicator. So we have this idealized line with the kind of darker gray here, and then we have what's actually happening in the blue. So you can hover over any date and start to see what happened that day. Like maybe you came above the line because you added some records, or maybe you're below because the team is just crushing it and turning out a bunch of features. So it's not obviously realistic that you're going to follow this line to exactly, but it's just, again, that helpful early indication. And then you can start to come down and take a look at additional details as to records added, maybe some release dates have changed, and get some more information as you kind of head into those regularly scheduled check-in meetings. Which, if I head over to this tab, I have set up a meeting agenda note for an example check-in. So these are really handy to keep in your workspace documents, which you can find under notebooks here. And you can also set these up as a template, so you can just add them week after week and you're not, again, starting from scratch. So for this check-in right now, we have our high-level agenda here at the top. I included the release record pill. So if I click on this, I'll be able to open up all of the release details. Really helpful during a call, so you can start to dig into additional information if questions come up or you need to update data. I got that record pill just by clicking on this link here at the top, and then you can paste it into a note or anywhere our AHA text editor appears. And you can even right click these and customize kind of what type of data you want to show. So let's maybe include the status. We want to add release date. You can customize that there. It's a really nifty trick that I like to use often. And then we were looking at this mobile updates Gantt in the Gantt view, but you can also embed this in a meeting note as well. So it's interactive. So it's really great to be able to come in here. Let's say we're concerned about that payment security update feature, dig into the details from this view as well. So you're not having to switch between multiple different tabs in that meeting. And then maybe at the end of your meeting, you want to really cover all of those risks that might have popped up. So here is a pivot table where I pulled together any feature within my mobile app updates release that has a flagged delivery risk. So that way you kind of have that indication as to which features might need some extra attention. Maybe you need to document a mitigation plan down here at the bottom with owners assigned to it. This just makes it really transparent and available to all folks within your workspace to review during the meeting as well as after, and have those open lines of communication. So we started out this section talking about how to calculate progress and visualize that on your Gantt, but you can also visualize it in that burn down in the retrospective report, and how to pull all of this data together in a really helpful check-in meeting note. Back to you, Chrissy.
So at this point, your product launched and it was a great success. Of course, the first thing to do is celebrate the team's incredible accomplishments. And then we can reflect on the launch process to make your next one even better. So for many teams, this comes in the form of a retrospective, which I'm sure is familiar to a lot of you. This is when you'll discuss what went well, what could have been better, and what we are going to be doing differently next time. This will really help you understand how the release process went and give you some ideas on how you can adapt going forward. It's also really important to monitor your customer feedback to the new product or features you just launched. And here at AHA, we do this in a few different ways. So we, from the product team, talk to our customers directly to see what they think. And our customer success team also relays comments that they hear. We monitor user metrics to see what adoption looks like. And of course, we watch for ideas and comments that come in through our own ideas portal as well. As a bonus, we'll keep an eye on the marketing assets like the blog posts and social media posts to see what kind of reactions those receive. All of these qualitative and quantitative information can help you determine how successful your launch was and provide learnings for you to take to your next one.
Awesome. So let's head back to our features board. I'll refresh so we get our premium plan release. And take a look at this partner portal one that is complete. So let me ship this last feature and I am going to ship this release. So you can notify watchers that the work is complete, set our ship date. Hooray. So one really neat feature about this is you can draft release notes with the help of AI. So I am going to click that from here, you can decide which records you want to include in your release notes. So if some were not applicable for maybe customers to understand, you can always uncheck those to leave them out. In this case, I'm going to select all of them. We see we have a lot here, so let me click next, and I can just kind of sit back and let AI write these release notes for me. So it is going to take into account the feature name, feature description, and then group them by type as well. So we see we have a lot in new, but we also had some improvements and some research related features. And then from here, I can copy these notes. So I can just copy all the text and then paste it into a word editor of your choice. Or you can click next and save these in that thread recycling workspace. So it'll show up in your documents, kind of where we saw our check-in meeting note. So we get a nice preview here. From here, we can choose some rich formatting options. Maybe you want to drop in some images, really make it pretty before you start to share it with your customers. So another nice feature of this is that it's going to be automatically linked to all the records that were included in these release notes. So if you come back and you're taking a look at the knowledge-based training resources feature, it will show up here in your related tab of that. And then it will also be saved in your workspace documents under release notes. So from here, you can work with it and share it out as you please. So now that we have shared all of that goodness with our customers, of course, we also want to take a look at our retrospective report for this completed release. So we can see our burn down looks a little bit different from what we saw before. Our release progress is 100% complete. We can see there were instances where we, fell below and above that idealized line as expected. And you can start to come in here and drill into a bit more data as to what happened during the release, start to get some of that quantitative insights into how things went. And then when you're ready to get more input, maybe from across the product team or bring in cross-functional players as well, one really nice way to do this is to host a retrospective in a collaborative whiteboard. So this one I've set up using our sprint retrospective template, which works equally well for a release or launch retrospective. Just gives you those main buckets of what went well, what could have been better, what you could do differently, and then be able to document some action items. And with this, you can set up a to-do for your team to add their ideas prior to a meeting, or you could start with the blank template and start to collaborate live on the call as well. So folks can add their sticky notes in here, add emoji reactions, just to kind of gauge from the rest of the team how things went, get those key learnings so that you can make each launch better and better. So that is a really great way to reflect. And before I hand it over to Q&A, I just wanted to call out another new really nifty feature we launched recently, which is the ability to search our knowledge base right from the app. So you can see I can pull up an introduction to releases article, and I can see it right here within the app, which is super handy. You can even detach it from this menu and move it around if you want, or of course view it in another tab as well. And then if you need additional help, you can always get help from an expert right here from our help menu as well. So with that, I'm sure there's been a lot of questions coming in. So let's see from Rose what we have.
Yes, and thank you both. We packed a lot of goodness into that, and hopefully you all feel like you learned a ton. It looks like we have a few minutes for questions, and thank you everyone for all of your great questions. So to start off, this is such a good question. How can you find a release once it has shipped and is then removed from the features board?
Yeah, great question. Because if I come into that features board, we see when we shipped that partner portal release, it kind of disappeared here. So you might want to go back and look at that data. There's a few different ways you can do that. One of which you can actually come into a Gantt and show shipped releases and take a look at that there. I tend to like to pull together a list report. So you can pull together a list report, kind of find that release there or filter by shipped releases to kind of get that list. So I know it's gone from the features board because its work is complete, but the data is not lost. That's for sure.
Yes. Okay. Great tips there. And then you touched on the drafting release notes with AI and having them all connected to the features, which was really cool to see. Someone was curious what data the AI tool looks at when drafting those release notes.
Yeah, so the AI tool looks at the data that you have on your record name and your record description. So the more information you have in both of those fields, the better the release notes it generates.
Great, thank you. And then I think we have time for one or two more here. We did get a couple questions about filtering that I thought would be good to cover because of what we have planned. So Chrissi, the questions were, what about filtering by assignees or epics? Do you want to speak to what we have planned for filters on the Gantt?
Yeah, really, really exciting. So right now you already have a number of filter options on the Gantt chart. However, we do have a feature plan to allow you to filter by feature fields and epic fields as well. This is coming sometime this quarter. So just a little sneak preview for those of you who attended our tutorial. I'll send an idea in the chat so you all could subscribe to the idea. And once we launch that new feature, you'll then get notified.
Awesome. And then I think I'll sneak in one more question here since it's such a good one and there's a lot of good functionality for this that we didn't have time to cover. It could probably be a tutorial of its own. But someone is asking about best practices for using the Gantt to pulse with cross-functional teams as the release progresses. Kathryn, I know you had more to cover with like showing how to bring in the marketing release. Do you want to just speak briefly to how that is definitely possible to do?
Yeah, when we were looking at Gantt just with this Fredwin cycling workspace, but of course you can bring in other workspaces as well, like such as marketing, if that is applicable. But if those teams, their work is not necessarily being tracked in a hub, a really great way is to just start to add phases and milestones. You can, like I said, add custom fields to maybe capture what team has ownership over that or a particular individual. So that way, as a PM, you still have that big picture view and you can kind of monitor how those things are going and update data as you have those regularly scheduled check-ins. Anything you would add, Chrissi?
No, that's great.
Great. Okay. And with that, let's wrap it up. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to our lovely presenters. We hope you're now all feeling inspired to approach your next big launch with the tools you need to be successful. So thanks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.